Hello, everyone. Hello, class. So I am here to give you a two-part lecture. So we will now proceed to our discussion on morphology. So as I mentioned last time, our first discussion will focus on words. Now, as part of our discussion as well on introduction to the English language. So the first part of my lecture will focus on words, morphology, and everything in between. So as mentioned, you have a separate subject on morphology, specifically on structure. However, in this subject, I will just give you a brief introduction to the concept or study of morphology. So before anything else, let us understand what morphology is. When you know a word, you know its sound and its meaning. But because sound meaning relationship is arbitrary or sometimes unclear or not expressly or directly stated in terms of meaning, some words sound the same but mean differently, or same meaning but sounds different. For example, when we encounter the words sofa and couch. So depending on the cultural background or the maybe the nationality of the person saying these words, meanings also vary. So here in the Philippines, we are used to speaking or saying sofa, whereas in some other parts of the country as well, we use the word couch. But either way, our understanding is that it's a furniture that can be used in, for example, a living room inside a house. So basically, what we know is that some words may be similar in spelling, but they are different in terms of pronunciation, or some words may be different in spelling or word choice or vocabulary, but they actually mean the same. This is the very importance why we need to study morphology, because when we get to better understand morphology, we also learn the intricacies, the smallest details of the word or words that we encounter. So definitely this will give us an idea as to the lexical item or the part of speech to which a specific word or lexicon belongs. So that is the importance of studying morphology. So when you hear the word morpheme, please take note that it is the most elemental unit of grammatical form. So it may be or it may not be the smallest unit, but it's the most elemental unit of grammatical form in the sense that without it or in the absence of a morpheme, it's going to be difficult for us to form a word. That's why morphemes play a very significant role in the formation of a word. No? And then consequently, a word forming phrases, phrases forming clauses, clauses forming sentences, and then sentences forming paragraphs. So essentially, morphemes are very important because they help us in the grammatical formation and the attainment of structure in terms of our expressions. So what is the rule? So for example, in our local language, we say English, and that refers to an Englishman. But when we say in English, we are referring to the English language. Now, we have to be very careful with the affixations because when we affix certain syllables or morpheme to a word, meanings also change. So, for example, if we say English, we're talking about a person, an Englishman. But if you say in English, we're talking about the language spoken by that Englishman. It's the same when we say Bisaya. We're talking about a person, a Bisayan, or a Cebuano maybe. And then we have Binisaya, which is the Visayan language. So when you hear the word Binisaya, we're talking about the language being spoken. Ilocano, we're talking about a person, an Ilocano. But if you hear the word Inilocano, we're talking about the Ilocano language or the language spoken by an Ilocano. So affixations matter so much in word formations because definitely they change meanings. Now, I think you've heard before the word root. Morphologically, complex words consist of a morpheme root and one or more affixes. A root or root word may or may not stand alone as a word, so it depends. For example, when we say paint in painter, paint there is the root. Read in the word we read, read is the root. Sieve in the word conceive, sieve there is the root. And ling, as in linguist, is our root. So in these cases, you may see that there are some roots which can stand alone, and those that cannot. So, for example, if we hear or say the word paint, we know that it can stand alone. So, meaning it's a root that can stand alone. But in the word sieve or ling, such as in conceive and linguist, these are roots that cannot stand alone, meaning they need affixes so that they can stand as words. So, again, roots are not necessarily base words that can stand alone. These can also be base words that cannot stand alone and may need affixes for them to become words that can stand alone. Now, Semitic languages like Hebrew and Arabic have a unique morphological system. Nouns and verbs are built on a foundation of three consonants, and one derives related words by varying the pattern of vowels and syllables. Let's take a look at this as an example. So, for example, Egyptian Arabic root for the word right is the three-letter word KTB. So, if we affix two syllables, two vowel sounds within, such as katab, we mean he wrote. But when we affix as an infix, no, sounds a and e as in katib, that's writer. And then when you say kitab, okay, we're talking about book. And then if it's kutub, the plural form, we say books. Okay, my pronunciation may not be as accurate, but what I'm trying to say here is that affixes can change the meaning of a word. The semantics may vary depending on what we affix to a certain word, especially if it's an infix. Definitely the morphological structure as well as the meanings vary or change. So if you have noticed, the three letter word here, which is KTB, means only one word, and that is right. However, when we affix certain sounds or syllables within the word KTB, then the meanings also change. That is now the power of affixation. Morphological processes tell us that when we affix words, definitely we achieve a totally different meaning for each of these words. And that's why we need to be very careful with what we affix these words. Because, for example, if it comes from a different language or nationality, meanings may extremely change, no? Such as in the case of Egyptian Arabic. Now, when a root morpheme is combined with an affix, it forms a stem. So a while ago, I was talking about a root being the base where you affix certain syllables. But when a root morpheme is already combined with its affix or affixes, it becomes a stem already. Other affixes can be added to a stem to form a more complex stem. Now, for example, the root is komski. That's a proper noun. But when we add affix or suffix ite to make it Comskite, we are saying that it's a noun plus suffix formula. So it becomes now a stem. Komski, in this example, is already a stem, not anymore a root. So when we, for example, formulate the word Komskites, noun plus suffix, that becomes a word already. Next example, when we say believe, that is a verb. But when we add the suffix able to make it believable, we are forming now verb plus suffix. Believe in that case becomes now a stem. And then if we affix, no, for example, another prefix to make it unbelievable, following the prefix verb suffix formula, it becomes a word now. Another example, when you say system, it's a noun, so it's a root only. But when we add the suffix atic to make it systematic, noun plus suffix, the system here becomes a stem now. So when we add another affix, such as unsystematic, it's still a stem, prefix, noun, suffix. So even if we add the suffix al to make it unsystematical, prefix, noun, suffix, and suffix, it's still a stem. But the moment we make the stem unsystematically, wherein we added another suffix, and ultimately, this is now the final word that we can produce out of affixation, that one now is a word. So if you can see the pattern, it all starts with a root. That's the simplest form of the word being affixed to. And then the moment we add another affix, it becomes a stem. And if it is not yet a final word, then it remains to be a stem. But the moment that you add more affixes to it to make it lengthily a word, that's the time that the process undergoes um, changes, no, in terms of being a root to becoming a stem and finally to becoming a word. So that's how we analyze the morphological structure of our words. So not until that you have reached the ultimate word that you can produce out of the affixation process, you cannot still say that it's already a word. No? It remains to be a stem, no, in that case. Now, with the addition of each new affix, a new stem and a new word are formed. Linguists sometimes use the word base to mean any root or stem to which an affix is attached. So either it's a root or the stem, for as long as you can still affix it or you can still attach affixes to it, it is or it can be considered a base. So we have this now, the concept of bound roots. Bound roots do not occur in isolation and they usually acquire meaning only in combination with other morphemes. So that's why they are considered bound because they need to be bound to another affix, another syllable, another root, or another word in order for them to stand alone. For example, words of Latin origin such as receive, conceive, perceive, deceive, or deceive words, they actually share a common root, no, which is sieve, and the words permit, remit, commit, they also share the same root, which is mit. So if you use the word sieve only, or maybe the word mit only, definitely they cannot stand alone as words because they don't have their own meanings. However, the moment that you affix them with something to come up with a new word, you know, for example, receive and conceive, that's the time that we can consider them as word already. So in that case, words sieve and mit are only bound roots. They have no independent meaning in short. Now, what are the classification of English morphemes? First one is what we call the derivational morpheme. Derivational morpheme is when added to a base, a new word with a new meaning is derived. So, for example, from the noun pure, and when you add the suffix ify, you make purify, which is a verb. Purify, which is a verb, when you add the suffix cation to indicate process, no, you produce the word purification, which is now a noun. Now, I want you to observe the changes in terms of the part of speech. So regionally, we have the word pure, which is um I'm sorry, that should be adjective, no? Pure adjective plus ify, purify to make it a verb. So the transition from an adjective to a verb here constitutes that the word ify is actually an example of a derivational morpheme. The same goes with the affixation or the suffixation. So from the verb purify, and then you add it with the suffix cation to make the word purification, which is a noun. Cation there is another example of a derivational morpheme. So in short, any affix that you attach to a word, and if it changes the part of speech of that word, that can be considered a derivational morpheme. Okay, so some more examples of derivational morphemes showing the processes, no, that changes from noun to adjective, from verb to noun, from adjective to adverb, from noun to verb, adjective to noun, and verb to adjective. So all the affixes attached to the stem, no, or the root are all examples of derivational morphemes. So all you have to remember when we talk about derivational morphemes is that when the part of speech of the root or the base changes, now from this to another part of speech, then the affix that you are attaching to the base can be considered a derivational morpheme. Okay, I hope that one is clear. However, there are some that do not cause a change in grammatical structure because oftentimes prefixes never do. No, for example, let's say friendship. No, although in this case, this is a suffix. So friend is a noun, but when you add ship to it, it's still a noun. So when you say friendship, it remains to be a noun. So there's no change here in terms of the part of speech, no, such as noun to noun, verb to verb, adjective to adjective. However, they're still considered derivational morphemes. Why? Because the word itself, derivational, tells us that we derive a new word belonging to a class or another part of speech out of another word. So deriving a new word from another word, which is relatively shorter to the new word being formed. Now, that's an example of a derivational morpheme, the affix that you attach to it. Now, for example, when you say undo, no, the base here is do. But the moment that you put the prefix un to it, or you affixate it with undo remains to be a verb. However, no, even so, the prefix "un" here can be considered a derivational morpheme because we have derived a new word from another word. Okay, so that's basically the concept of a derivational morpheme, which is in contrast to an inflectional morpheme. Now, they have a strictly grammatical function. They mark properties such as tense, number, person, and so forth. They never change the grammatical category of the stems to which they are attached. So basically, if you attach them with, for example, a word, they remain to be the same word with the same meaning. It's just that the tense, the number, or the person changes. Okay? So let's see these examples. No? I sail the ocean blue. He sails the ocean blue. John sailed the ocean blue. John has sailed the ocean blue. And John is sailing the ocean blue. If you notice, for the five sentences that you are seeing on your screen now, sail there consistently functions as a verb. It's just that there are affixes, no, specifically suffixes attached to these verbs so that we can agree, we can make the subject agree with the verb. No? For example, he sails and I sail. Or maybe to indicate tense, no? An activity that may have happened or is still happening at present. For example, John sailed, indicating past tense. John has sailed, no, present perfect tense. John is sailing, it's present progressive tense. So these are all inflectional morphemes just because when you attach them to a word, there's no change from this part of speech to another one. Now they remain to be the same part of they remain to be in the same part of speech. So basically, that's an inflectional morpheme. No, so I just want you to make yourselves familiar that that in most times we use inflectional morphemes when we want to make properties or mark properties, no, such as tense, number, persons. Now, here are some examples of modern English which has only eight bound inflectional affixes. So, as you can see here, we have the third person singular present, past tense ed, progressive ing, no, past participle en, plural form, no, the suffix s, apostrophe s for possessive, er for comparative, and est for superlative. So, these two are basically for the adjectives. So, once you affix them to a specific word or to words, then definitely the meaning or meanings do not change at all. However, there is now agreement in terms of tense, no, the person involved in a sentence. So this is more of I would say, an illustration of morphemes. So as you can see, we have the bound and the free morphemes. And then under the bound morphemes, you have the affixes, which could be classified either as derivational or inflectional. And then we have now the roots here, no, which are basically the words that cannot stand alone, but etymologically, they are actually words. No? And then we have the free morphemes, no, such as open, class, or the content or lexical words. No? For example, nouns, adjectives, verbs, and adverbs, they are all examples of free morphemes. On one hand, we have the closed class or commonly we say function or grammatical words. Now, these include conjunctions, prepositions, articles, pronouns, and auxiliary verbs. So there's a big difference between inflectional and derivational morphemes. Now, inflectional morphemes usually take grammatical functions, derivational morphemes take lexical functions, and then there's no word class change for inflectional morphemes, but for derivational morphemes, it may cause word class change. No, that's what I'm saying in terms of from one part of speech to another. For inflectional morphemes, there can be small or no meaning change at all, but in derivational morphemes, there can be some meaning changes. Inflectional, it's often required by rules of grammar, whereas derivational, it's never required by the rules of grammar. And then for inflectional, it follows derivational morphemes in a word, whereas in derivational, usually they precede as inflectional morphemes in a word. Okay? So now let's talk about the hierarchical structures of words. Now, if we have parsing or tree diagrams for sentences or syntactic structures, you have to take note that we also have the same for morphology or word formations. Morphemes are added in a fixed order, meaning there is a specific order in terms of how we add affixes to a base. This order now reflects the hierarchical structure of the word. A word is not a simple sequence of morphemes because it has its own internal structure. Now, for example, the word unsystematic. Now, we can have the hierarchical structure of this word unsystematic using this diagram. So, of course, the word unsystematic is an adjective, and then we parse out first the prefix "un." So we have now systematic, which is an adjective. And then we parse out "atic." So what's left is unsystem or system. And then because we have already parsed out "un," what we have here now is the noun system. So if you notice, the way we parse the word depends on the intended meaning. So for example, if I'm saying unsystematic, I'm emphasizing more on the word system. So we remove the affixes or the prefixes first before we can reach the noun or the ultimate word or the base of the structure. So we could have two meanings for this one. It could be and system plus the prefix or the suffix rather "atic," we are creating the adjective here, which is unsystematic. Or it could be "un" plus the adjective "systematic" to still make an adjective term as unsystematic. So again, we have to understand how to parse our words first so that we would know the word choice, the lexical item, or the specific category of the word to which it belongs. Now, let's consider another example, unsystematically. So if you can see here, the word unsystematically is actually on the top because it's an adverb. So it's the full word that we are going to structure out. And then we remove the suffix ly first so that we can come up with the same base, or a word that can stand alone, which is unsystematical. So from the word unsystematical, um, we can now remove another suffix to still make another word. For example, unsystematic. So we parsed out the suffix "al" over here. Okay. Now, if you have now the word unsystematic, how do we parse out the prefix or maybe the affix to be generic? So we parse out first the prefix "un" so that what's remaining here is systematic now. Okay, now we have systematic. So we parse out system being the base, because of course we cannot parse it further by saying syst or tem. No, that's definitely grammatically incorrect. So we parse out the suffix "atic," and we have the word system. So system here now is the ultimate word that we are looking for. That is for the word unsystematically. Now, this is rather a complex word. Now, despite its complexity, it is well formed because it follows the morphological rules of language. So, sometimes when we parse out sentences or words, no, to be specific, we have the tendency that we get confused in terms of which affix needs to be removed first. No? For example, in the word unsystematically, do I remove un first or should it be the suffix ally, no, to make it unsystematic? But if I remove the prefix un first, it will become systematically, which is still a grammatically correct word, right? So it depends, no? The way we parse sentences depends on how we want to understand the base of the given word. So this is what I mentioned. We can say unsystem, no, which is a very simple word that can be ungrammatical. No, we don't say unsystem at all. No, there's no word existing such as this. Now, tree diagrams make explicit the way speakers represent the internal structure of the morphologically complex words in their language. So, tree diagrams basically are very helpful because they help us better understand the complexity, no, as far as morphological processes are concerned, no, in a specific language. So here, the following tree shows that the inflectional agreement morpheme S follows the derivational morphemes IZE, um, and the prefix RE in the word refinalizes. So we have here, um, we remove the word, the suffix S first. So we are left with refinalize, which is an acceptable word. So between saying refinalize or refinal, which one is grammatically correct? So we say remove the re first. So we are left now with the word finalize, which is an acceptable word. So after that, we get rid of the suffix ize and focus on the adjective final. Now, for structurally ambiguous words, words that have more than one meaning by virtue of having more than one structure. Now, for example, the word unlockable. You have to be very careful with this one because it can get tricky. So if you notice, we have here two versions of how we could parse our word. No? So both of them, um, regardless of the framework or the structure, no, we can say that unlockable is an adjective. So in the first example, we parse out the prefix un first, so we are left with the word lockable. And then from the word lockable, we parse out the suffix able, so we are left with the verb lock. On the other hand, if we follow this structure, which is still on unlockable, what they did here is to eliminate first the suffix able. So we are left with the word unlock. And then from the word unlock, we parse out the prefix un. So we are left with our base, which is lock. So it highly depends on what the meaning of the word is so that we would know how exactly it is going to be parsed, no, using any of these frameworks I introduced. So this is another example, no, for unlockable. Unlockable, which could mean not able to be locked, cannot be locked. And then, no, in this case, imagine you are inside the room and you want some privacy, but unfortunately, the door is unlockable. Okay? And then we also have compounds. These are two or more words to join to form a new word. So as you can see here, um, we have the adjective bittersweet, the noun or the adjective headstrong, and then we have noun poorhouse, homework, pickpocket, and then the verbs whitewash, spoon feed, and sleepwalk. So for compound nouns, no, our word diagram can become a little complicated. So compounds also have internal structure. This is clear from the ambiguity of a compound like top hat rack, no, which can mean a rack of 4 top hats. But if it's the other way around, the top hat rack, well, with the way we structured this one, it could mean the highest hat rack. So again, the way we parse our words will heavily depend on the intended meaning. No? Or when we parse it without even having the knowledge of the intended meaning, no, our parsing now can produce a meaning the way we want it to be understood by people. Okay? So I will just end my discussion there. No, we will have another topic on morphological processes, but my goal here is to ensure that at least you have a grasp, no, of morphology. So basically, when we talk about morphology, we just deal with word formations, word processes. And we need to understand that through morphology, we get to improve our understanding of our lexical choices, no, the linguistic features, as well as the processes that we undertake in the formulation of new words. So thank you very much, no, for listening to my brief lecture. So if you have any question, no, you can simply post them on the thread, no, below this video that I will be posting on LMS. So thank you very much, everyone. Please stay tuned for the next upload that I will have. No, the next topic will be focusing on morphological processes. So once again, thank you very much.